Hi, welcome to a new episode of Engineering Rebuilt.
Do you think you know a lot about construction?
Maybe we can provide a fresh perspective.
This is a podcast where we rebuild preconceptions of engineering,
Reclaim the narrative,
and share the voices of women from across the construction industry. Why not join us?
Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Engineering Rebuilt podcast. I'm your host Yvonne Raleigh, and together with Lina Soderberg, we will be talking with the totally amazing Rebecca Lapraik of Colas. Rebecca, why don't you tell us something about yourself?
I would love to. Hi Yvonne, hi Lina. My name's Rebecca Lapraik, so I'm a proposals manager for Colas. So I lead on the term service bidding for highway maintenance contracts. So that is the majority of my role.
Amazing. How did you get into that role, or what's been your journey to get to that point?
Probably not conventional, but I don't know who does get into this role in a conventional way. I've got a degree in rural resource management. I don't think there's many of us in the construction industry that have got that qualification. And I had to do a year in industry as part of my degree. And at the point that I was looking for something to work on, I saw an advert in the newspaper, shows how old I am, in the newspaper, for Mott MacDonald, for an environmentalist. And so I applied for that, did that for a year as part of my year in industry. That got me into construction, and I knew I wanted to do that when I came out of university as well. I knew I wanted to pursue a career in construction because I thought I could make more of a difference there than I could in other fields. And so then I went into a graduate training scheme at Balfour Beatty and really enjoyed that. I was in the health and safety team, and I could it was a good role, really good role, but we moved office and I could see the proposals team sitting next to us working on all these exciting bids, and I was really intrigued as to what they were up to and the buzz of it all, and the sort of the high pressure deadlines and the sort of senior leadership involvement, or the glossy material they were producing and the graphics and everything. And I thought, this looks really cool. I'd quite like to find out a bit more about this. So I then managed to get a placement as part of my graduate programme working with the bid team, and I really enjoyed it. It really worked for me. The writing, the creativity, sort of basically essay writing, which I enjoyed during my degree, and I knew that's what I wanted to do, so I carried on doing that, and I've just continued in that field ever since. And I've worked on some brilliant projects and met some great people, and I think it's a really great career, really enjoying it.
It's always seemed like a very good kind of teamwork environment, proposals, because you have that high pressure environment and the deadlines like you're describing, and really like coming together as a group of people. Yvonne, you have loads of experience in that space. How have you found it?
Yeah, that's how Rebecca ended up on this podcast. We just finished doing a really high pressure tender together, and yeah, it is. It's like a mini project. I think that's what I like about it. It tends to be normally. I loved the buzz of working on site. I loved that construction team feel that you get from working together on a project. But once I had kids, I found that was really difficult to achieve. But in the proposals and tendering side of things, you can have that same buzz, but in an office environment in a smaller amount of time, and you can pack more of them into the year. And that seems like a great deal. So yeah, I absolutely agree. It's definitely a good way to get that sense of team membership that you get on construction sites, but in an office environment.
Yeah, totally. And you really need to rely on your team, and you really find out, how people that you gel with, and the people that you can go to regardless of whatever you're asking. You build up that network of really great support around you, and it actually is a bit of a thrill and an adrenaline rush, and you realize how much adrenaline's involved once you approach the deadline and get the bid in, and then afterwards you're like, oh, it's like takes it out of you. It's so exhausting. So it definitely gives you a kick.
Yeah, do you get hooked on the rush? Do you get like a bit of a low afterwards and you're like, when's the next deadline?
It does happen, and I feel like my life is a series of projects with deadlines as well. I can't help myself. Everything has a program and a deadline, otherwise I don't know what I'm doing.
Have you bid for any projects where you've been like, oh, this one's actually really awesome, can I just stay? Or are you always like, can I stay on? Can I be part of the delivery of this one?
I think it goes back to the teamwork as well, actually, because that's the thing, is that you work on this team with this team, and then they go off to deliver the project, and you're like, oh, I really like that team. I'd quite like to carry on working with them. So I have had that experience, and that's another challenge, is kind of going from a team that's working really well together on that bid. You get that bid in, you move on to the next one, and you've got to kind of build that whole team thing up again. So that is a challenge, but yeah, I definitely would like to have carried on working with some of the people I've worked with over the years.
Yeah, interestingly, I bid before I had the kids. I was part of the tender team for Spinnaker Tower, and that's how I ended up building Spinnaker Tower, because I saw the tender, I did the tender programming for it, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to miss this one. This one looks like it's going to be really, really good. And I went and knocked on the director's door, and I said, look, I know that I'm not actually on your list of who's going to be on this, but I really, really want it, and that role is perfect for me, and I'm going to be quite upset if you don't give it to me. And fortunately, he was a reasonable human being. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a different team every tender, and that's the challenge of rebuilding those relationships and building new relationships in a very short period of time. I'm just started a tender with a new team, and we've got 3 weeks to deliver what is a multi-million-pound tender, and you've got to build that relationship, create a useful team, and get the job delivered in that very short window, and that's always a challenge.
How do you learn how to build those relationships really quickly? Is it something that just comes naturally out of loads of experience of doing it, or do you go into a team and you're like, I know these things will help, so I'll do these things specifically?
Yeah, I think it is a lot of experience, isn't it? But there are sort of tools that you can use, aren't there? So you can, sort of assess people's personalities using, insights or whatever. So you can use that so that you know the sort of characters that you're dealing with, and understand how to work with those types of people, because everyone's got a different way of working and what suits them and suits other people. But yeah, it is difficult, and I suppose I'm just try and be a bit of a mediator, and see things from other people's perspectives, and try and encourage people, and yeah, no easy answer.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because normally we'd start with a workshop, because that's a good way of saying to everybody, okay, these are all the people that are in the room, and you can see in that workshop the dynamic of who's going to sort of step up and say, yes, they can do stuff. But also those that are sort of hanging around the edges and not necessarily wanting to get involved, but have got knowledge, and being able to use that workshop environment to identify those different personality types is key to making sure everybody works together. So yeah, there's definitely a few things that you can do that make it easier, but there's no hard and fast rules, and every team is different. So you got out of rural management, you got into construction. What else do you do when you're not doing this?
So I set up a nursery and a community play centre in our village a couple of years ago now. It was a really big project, and I'd had my son, and I was aware that there was this project going on. So that was actually 10 years ago that I was started to get involved with it. And I knew they were setting up this facility that was going to be for working people, and we really needed it. And I thought, I think I really need to get involved, because I knew that I needed that when I went back to work. The school in particular is really difficult to accommodate when you've got kids. The wraparound childcare, the breakfast and after school care is really important. And I thought, I'd like my son to go to the school in the village in a few years' time. I would like to be able to continue working in the same way. And I thought, I need to be part of this project. So we built it from scratch, and I got involved once. So we've got some Section 106 funding and some other funding from a loan and various other sort of West Sussex funding pots and so on, and set the whole thing up. And I took over as chair once the construction was pretty much complete. But it was quite a task to, get the recruitment. So it was great for me. It was all volunteering for me, my spare time. But it was the first time I'd interviewed someone for a job there, so it was a great experience. Had to get involved in cash flow forecasts, and it just gave me loads of exposure to different things outside of the day job, really. And we got it all up and running, and it's actually been a real success. It's full to capacity. In fact, I think they're probably wanting to build an extension now, so I'm trying to keep a low profile so I don't get involved in that bit. But it's addictive as well, I suppose. I don't know, maybe I'm addicted to these sort of things, but you just want to continue to see it being successful, and encouraging. It just makes life easier for people having this facility. And the other thing that we've done, which I was really keen to get up and running, was outreach as well. So there's been some initiatives. So as well as the sort of conventional nursery and after school care and everything, it supports families that can't afford the bills. It's costly, isn't it, to send children to childcare? But we've been able to subsidise some of their the places for their kids, and also we've done some outreach with elderly people. So we've brought people from local care home together with the nursery kids, and had various activities that they've done together. They've done craft activities and singing and dancing, and it's been so rewarding to see that come to life. And I'm really proud of that achievement, actually, having been involved in that and see that happen. Wow,
that's so amazing. That's really so impressive, because it's something that comes up a lot. It's this idea of balancing sending kids to school and working at the same time is something that everybody seems to do, but just seems to be set up very badly for it to actually be possible or be achievable. And I don't understand how something so simple can have so many problems. I don't know if you want to talk a bit about practical challenges with that you've faced.
Yeah. I mean, it is nursery's not so bad, because the nurseries pretty much are open 7:30, 8 o'clock until 6 p.m. And that is actually, you can work that around the working day. But at school, it's 9 until 3:15, and that really is so impractical for many working parents. And so a lot of people have to adjust their way of working. I find it interesting that when I do a couple of days a week, I do the drop off and picking up, and it's mainly women that are doing that at the school gate. And I know that people have got choices, but it's just surprising that in this day and age, even there are facilities there for people to use the wraparound care, but it's still not an option for people, and they're still having to. It looks like it's women that mainly having to make the compromises. There are, a lot of men, and it is, definitely more balanced than it probably would have been in history. But yeah, it's interesting to see that.
Yeah, it's good that it's moving in the right direction, and what you've set up must be making a really big difference to actually helping people achieve that, especially helping people with subsidized placements for their children and things like that. That's so important, because for so many people that's such a conscious choice. Like I could get my salary and then just end up spending it on childcare, and in that case, why don't I just spend time with my child? You can really understand that dilemma, but it just doesn't seem like it should be that way at this point. And I also think maybe I'll have a different viewpoint when I have kids, but your work and your income, like doing that job, that's what leads to you being eligible for promotions. That's what leads to your salary increasing over time. It also provides you with loads of financial freedom and a wider connection. And it just seems like we need to at least make sure that people are making the decision that they want to make and not being forced down a specific route because they don't have another choice. It just seems very backwards.
Yeah, and it feels like I think men and women do share the childcare responsibility more now, but it does feel like sort of women's careers might tend to make a bit more of a trend where you sort of have the early stage of your career, then perhaps you go off and have children, balancing the childcare needs, and then once the children grow up, it's a bit like, well, if you've not had your career throughout that period, what do you revert back to? Do you have something that you can then pick up, or do you then do something completely different? Is it an opportunity to do something completely different? And it feels like, I don't know, perhaps it's other careers or women that don't have children. It's not assumed that women should have, all have children, but it's more of a linear career path I think you would expect to have if you were just going through without those breaks and without that caring responsibility. Whereas I think it's just a different way of looking at careers for people's different lifestyles and everything. And I've been interested that we've launched a new initiative at work at COLAS for returners, so people that maybe had a career break for a couple of years. And I was reflecting on my time. I had maternity leave. I had a year off at a time, so I've had 2 kids, 2 years off, separate times, 5 years apart. And it is difficult considering that return to work, especially so much has changed in that time that you've had the child, and you go back into the workplace and things have changed at work and everything's changed at home and your priorities are really different and you've got a different perspective and things. So I'm really interested in this project that's been rolled out, which is to encourage people that have had at least a couple of years out to sort of, we can recruit them in a different way. There's advertising that goes into specific places. The interview process is slightly different for people that have had a career break, and interviews focus on different aspects, such as what's your thoughts on this, what's your experience on this, rather than have you done this recently, because that might not be recent experience. And then when they're taken on, they have 6 months where they're assigned a mentor and they're given extra support just to kind of make that return to work a bit more straightforward and provide the support to just ease that transition, because it would be so daunting to go back into work after having that sustained period of time off for whatever reason, caring for elderly parents or children, or there's so many things that go on in people's lives, partners, all sorts of things. So I think that's been a really interesting project, and I'll be really pleased to see that rolled out and how successful that's going to be.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think at least when I've spoken to people, that confidence piece is a big thing as well. Like having a specific route and knowing that that route has value and is respected, I think will just make it so much more likely for people to apply, because I think otherwise people get, at least people I've spoken to, they get this sort of imposter syndrome where it's like, well, I don't have experience because I haven't done this for so many years. I won't match up against the other people, whereas that's not the case.
Yeah, I think we're very guilty of that, aren't we? Particularly as women. I think that's recognised to be the imposter syndrome is recognised to be a real challenge that we face.
On that note, and I also think a particularly interesting question, given that you work in work winning and bid writing and things like that, because that always seems to be where people really have a finger on the pulse of the construction industry, because you see all the latest things that customers are coming through and asking for, and behaviours that are being looked for and that people are interested in. In a combination of those two experiences, where do you think, or how do you think the industry might look different in 5 years' time, based on what you've seen and your experiences?
Yeah, it's a privilege really of what we do, that we get to see all of that exciting stuff that's happening, and we have to be at the forefront, and we have to be pushing the boundaries really, and actually setting the strategy quite often for, we need to move in this direction, we need to get this certification, we need to think about this more. Carbon is way up there. Obviously, it's become so important, hasn't it? And I'm so excited to see what happens. We've been asked so many questions recently, having to set stretching targets, and as we're getting close to 2030 and 2040 and the targets that are being set, going to have to see a lot of these things come into reality, going to have to set a massive step change as to what we're doing as an industry, how we're specifying materials, how we're operating. We've been talking to someone recently about kind of encapsulating carbon within aggregate that then can then get encapsulated within a bound material, and so you could therefore end up with carbon negative projects if you could actually capture the carbon in the materials, which is a really exciting prospect. There's health and safety obviously is a massive issue, especially in the highways sector. Across construction, but highways is really challenging on the network, and trying to get people off the network and more automated processes, so there's more robots doing things rather than people involved. And maybe that's thinking about what skills we're going to need in the future. Maybe we're not going to need people so hands-on on the ground doing work. Maybe we're going to need more people sitting behind a computer controlling machines that are doing things, and maybe that's going to appeal to a completely different skill set. So there's so many interesting things happening at the moment, and it's really great to see it all unfold over the next few years, definitely.
What do you think, Yvonne? I think it's quite interesting, especially with sustainability, because we're definitely not there yet by any means. But for a long time, the attitude's been like, we can't do this, or we can't do it net zero, or we can't do it like this. And then suddenly people are asking for it. And there's a million solutions, like using hydrogen to power site cabins, and actually being able to heat site cabins with the waste from the power produced through hydrogen. And then, like you're saying, being able to store carbon in the materials that we're using. It's quite exciting, but also ironic that now the people are asking for it. That it's like, oh, okay.
You're absolutely right. And it's been like that for years, though. Always tenders have pushed the envelope, and it's always been. I love doing tendering because I can force boards to change direction. Because once you've put it into the bid, they can't. It's a legally binding thing. Certainly now with the new forms of contract, if it's written, then it's binding. What's in that quality submission is binding on everybody that's involved in the company, and so you can say, okay, we're going to have 50% women in 3 years' time, and we have on a number of tenders, and that pushes the inclusion thing. And you can say, yes, we are going to have zero diesel vehicles on the site by 2020 2025 or 2028 or whatever the target is that you've set. And you go back to the board and you say, look, this is what your client is looking for. And we need a commitment from you that that's going to be okay. And so those things are really good ways that the tender teams are pushing things forward. And also researching new technology and looking at the traffic management side of things. We did a bid recently for a TM team, and they're entirely automating the putting out of cones, so that there's nobody in the road putting cones out, because people putting cones out get killed every single year. I mean, we're still killing traffic management personnel at an absolutely ridiculous rate. But if you can automate that process and have it entirely automated, then you're saving lives. I mean, you still need the guys to drive the vehicles, to work, as Rebecca was saying, to work the computer to make it put the cones out in the right pattern. But it's not somebody in the front line who's at risk of being killed. And I think that's a major way that tender teams and in the industry itself can push itself by saying, okay, how can we do this differently? And that's the responsibility of tender teams, is to say, what we're doing at the moment isn't the best we can do. So how can we push the company to do better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to wrap up fairly soon, actually, Rebecca. But one thing that I've not had a chance to ask you about, which I'd really like to, is I think you're restoring an ancient woodland. Do you want to end by telling us something about that? Because I can't leave without having asked you.
Okay, yeah, sure, Lina. So I mean, I guess, so I'm still really keen on environment and biodiversity and everything, because that's what my background is ultimately. But yeah, we bought some woodland near to where we live, and basically it's been unmanaged for about 25 years, and the trees are just going to fall over, and they're not very valuable. They're kind of larch and pine species, so they're not good for the environment particularly. So we're thinning those out, and we're replacing them with the natural species, so oak and birch and beech, and I'll encourage the understory. So even though the actual trees on the woodland are 25 years old, there's been a woodland there for hundreds of, well, maybe even, I don't know, 1,000 years, something. And so the understory is still there, so we can plant these new trees, and it will encourage this ancient woodland back to what it should be and what it would have been, encourage all the associated wildlife and everything. And also we've got a community spin on that as well. I can't help myself, but I wanted to get some local schools are using it for free as a forest school, and we've got some adults with learning difficulties coming in as well to do some learning about the environment and woodcraft and all of that sort of thing. So it's just, we're so privileged that it's such a lovely place to go and disappear to and forget about work every now and then, which is much needed at times of high stress and drama in bidding.
And that's all just in your free time on top of this high pressure work winning job? Yeah. Well, it's all good. That's what weekends are for. No, that's amazing. Oh man, I'm so impressed. It's been really great to chat to you and get to know you a bit.
Thank you so much. Great to see you too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Engineering Rebuilt. We hope you enjoyed being part of the conversation. Please join us next time to hear more diverse stories from people who are reclaiming their narrative to rebuild engineering.